In January 2024, the Old World was created, and this made a lot of Age of Sigmar players very angry, and was widely regarded by the people who work at Warhammer community to be a very bad idea. Fortunately, they were wrong, and the scope of the project has changed, but since that point, we have seen a lot of things change over the course of the game. And I think one of the most marked differences that we've seen is how dragons have played and felt to play, both for, as the player and against them, massively have swung over the course of under 2 years, really. As a reminder, or if you haven't seen, I'm going to be streaming the Saffron Slam Teams event this weekend, 1st and 2nd of November. It's going to be on this channel. I believe the way that I'm going to do it is 5 individual short streams, each one lasting about 3.5 hours, during which I will have players who will be mic'd up. I will have a top-down camera. I'll hopefully have some extra fun shots that I can bring. Working with slightly limited equipment for the first one. It's a little bit proof of concept, but I'm really, really looking forward to being able to bring the coverage for Saffron Slam Teams. 5 games of Warhammer on this channel, actual in-person Warhammer, something that we haven't had yet. So looking forward to that, and there might be even me filling in for a round, depending on, there is some ongoing, discussion about who's going to fill a certain spot. I might end up playing on stream. So if you're interested in seeing me or other people playing on stream, do check in. It's going to be starting around 9:30 a.m. British summertime, GMT, 9:30 GMT on this channel, Saturday, 1st November. See you there. As a quick recap, The Old World came out in January 2024. Now, I don't think that this is the first game of its ilk. That was me just crowbarring in a Douglas Adams quote because I thought it fit quite nicely. Obviously, Warhammer Fantasy has been around for a long time. I think at this point 40 years. I could double check, but we're going to go with 40 years. It's 40 around-ish. And the new edition came out, obviously, the glorious return of Old World. The marketing around it was Warhammer community used the phrase grognards. It was very much, oh, we're making this for the people who wanted it years ago, but it's not for you. Don't play it. And also, the phrasing around legacy armies, don't buy any new models for this. So they weren't expecting it to be particularly, well received. Obviously, it's been fantastic. Lots of people who played Fantasy back in the day have come back to it. The classic story of middle-class guy in the UK is, the story that I get told all of the time. Gets to about 18, decides to start drinking and takes more interest in, looking for relationships, goes to university, gets a job, any of those things, takes a break, comes back after 8 to 15 years and goes, man, I should get back into this. And the Old World has been a great vessel for that. So Old World came out January 2024, and I'm sure some people had their finger on the pulse. I absolutely did not. I was terrible at the game when I started for a good, probably 6 months. Realistically, it took me a while to get my eye in with Old World. And dragons were pretty good hot off the press. Now, I thought ogres were the thing that was going to be amazing, so got that one wrong, but I'm sure a lot of people did spot that dragons were very, very good with the change to how dragons function. In previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy, a mount, or at least monstrous mounts, I don't think you could be shot off a horse, but a monstrous mount and the rider were 2 separate entities with their own toughness, with their own wounds, and you randomly allocated hits between them. This means that you didn't have one huge pile of wounds that you could stack defensive saves on top of, which has been the big problem for Old World. Why is that a problem in Old World? Well, because you take all of your saves. In other games, such as 40k, which I come from in recent memory, you take the best save that you have, you don't take all of the saves. In the Old World, what you do is you start off with your armor save, then you go to your ward save, then you go to your regen save, and if you've got all 3, you get to make all 3, unless there's something stopping you from doing so. So when you've got a mount that gives you loads of toughness, so getting you to T6, in Old World and Warhammer Fantasy, Toughness 6 is a pretty high bar to reach. You've got a good armor save. At the start of the game, it was very easy for a lot of armies to get a 2-up armor save, although there were some successive nerfs that made that more difficult to do. So you've got a Toughness 6 model with a 2-up armor save that also probably has a 5-up ward save and then sometimes has a 5-up regen as well. You've got a package that's very, very difficult to shift. On top of that, it's very consistent. The way that the dragon was looking at the start of the game is close order, the combat resolution bonus that you got for having a unit strength of 5 or greater and also having the close order rule. That was something that all dragons benefited from, so you went into combat with at least 1 combat res. And infantry, as we know it now, didn't have anywhere near as much in terms of their ability to stack combat res. Some armies could always beat a dragon in combat just through challenge mechanics. We'll talk about that in a second. But for the most part, if you were playing a dragon, you could use it with impunity. There wasn't really a lot that could threaten to harm it. Monster Slayer was one of the big answers that we had in the meta. The Bretonnian Duke, with the virtue of heroism, Monster Slayer. Some people even tried using the Monster Slayer sword. I, from the off, thought it was pretty terrible, because what if you weren't playing against dragons, and even if you are, you've got a pretty low chance of getting it off. So that never really got picked up heavily by most players, but dragons were running rampant at the start of the edition. And as mentioned, the way that you use a dragon, park it in front of your opponent. A lot of armies could take the spell Arcane Urgency from Battle Magic, and what you would do is turn 1, you would march your dragon 20 inches, you'd get it in a spot that you're happy with, you'd try and cast Arcane Urgency, you'd march it another 20 inches, and you just park it 1 inch away from the front of your enemy's unit that you wanted to be in combat with. They have no way of getting out unless they also have some sort of movement spell. They can't walk past you because you're blocking them, so you just get a free kill with the dragon. It was very easy to use, it was very strong, and that's the position that we find ourselves in at the start of the edition in January 2024, all the way through really to the summer of 2024. At some point in the run-up to summer, there is an FAQ, and that FAQ prevents Bedazzling Helm, an item that gives you +1 to your armor save and -1 to be hit. That item is made to be infantry and cavalry only, and this is a big change because it means that the armies that don't have a +1 to their armor save item inbuilt in their book are no longer able to get 2-up armor save dragons. What does this change? Really, this changes Chaos Dragons. Chaos Dragons were a real nightmare. They were running around with a 2-up armor save. They've got the 5-up ward save inbuilt. They were -1 to be hit from the Bedazzling Helm. They were very difficult to deal with. They were really the top dog. They were also, you had to reroll 6s to hit into them from Mark and Nurgle. Just a lot of stuff in there, and also their stat line inherently is just very, very good. So Chaos Dragons looked great. Bedazzling Helm gets nerfed. Cool. Takes a little bit off the top of dragons. Then we come to October 2024. Now, October 2024 is when I spoke to Dave. You may know Dave of Team England, the winning WTC team, so obviously someone who knows what he's talking about. An innovator, in fact, came up with what was coined the Goblin Star, Death Star, or Gobbo Star, or, by me, that bloody army again, after I had to face it multiple times at tournaments. Now, when I spoke to Dave in October 2024, this was not something that the rest of the sort of meta had picked up, but Dave had worked out that actually the best way to deal with a dragon is maths. If you just take a really, really big brick of goblins with poison shortbows, which is very easy to do, you can teleport them around the battlefield with elementalism using travel mystical pathways. The way that travel mystical pathways worked at the time is that you didn't have to be wholly within, you just had to be within. So your massive, A4 sheet of goblins, or bigger sometimes, was able to travel frankly ludicrous distances and always get into range to shoot the dragon. You were always going to be able to stand and shoot because the goblins had Death Stars. Because you were taking elementalism, you had access to Plague of Rust, so you're going to be stripping away the armor save of the dragon. They also had access to other great spells in there and other defensive tools. And the Goblin Poison Death Star became a bit of a force to be reckoned with in the meta. It got picked up pretty quickly. I'm not claiming that I spread its popularity. I think people would have noticed anyway, because people were pretty sick of dragons, and it's something that just dealt with dragons well. So we did see the adaptation of the Goblin Death Star. Not only did we have the Goblin Death Star, we had various other versions of it. Coming into the square-based online tournament number 2, we had the Royal Host Poison Death Star, which is a very similar version, but they can always volley fire. So this list could, it had less access to wizards, less access to good wizards, but it was always able to volley fire, so it was getting a lot more play into armies that weren't just the dragons with those shortbows. One of the big disadvantages of how the Poison Death Star used to work is that every model used to be able to see a large target. So even if you had 10 ranks of goblins and you moved, you were always going to be able to shoot every model that's in range. Now, that's been changed. and it's only going to be the second rank that can see. You can only get one additional rank, which has killed it in the FAQ. We'll get to that in a second. But previously, it was very easy to get a lot of shots. However, into non-large targets, this was pretty terrible because, yeah, you're only going to get 2 ranks of short bow shooting with poison. That's not going to do a huge amount that you can bring there. So what you're really looking to do is bring the Royal Host. You can always volley fire, so you're getting something like 2/3 of the shots in the unit. You get to get creative with how the unit is deployed. There's maths to it, I never looked too closely, but basically the answer is if your opponent's got a big pie plate of that Royal Host list, they were going to be able to shoot with probably 70, 80 shots of poison shooting, something along those lines. After this point, the adaptation that we've had with the Poison Death Stars, dragons start to fall off the top spot. They're actually struggling quite a lot. They weren't always, the number one best thing in the game. They were one of the best things in the game. But the things that are still very good, which is Undead, Vampire Counts are fantastic. They're one of the more difficult armies. Mortuary Cult was always a difficult matchup for dragons, and that's still very solid. These Poison Death Stars, Bretonians, there's a lot of things in the meta that dragons actually find a little bit difficult to get to. And by May of 2025, I put out a video called The Age of Dragons is Over. Now, I do want to say, full credit, I'm not the first person to be saying that. And I know that even though I credited Pash in this video, there were people online who were like, ugh, can't believe it took him so long to get to it. Well, I think that was just cope on my behalf a little bit. I'm a huge fan of playing dragons. I think they're very fun to put on the table. I really like where they are. And that leads us to July of 2025. And this is where we got the match play guide, but also the 1.5 FAQ. And this is what killed the top level dragon armies. When I say killed, I mean took them down from the number 1 spot that they had, or even number 4, number 5 spot, made it a lot harder to play dragons. So what were the changes there? Well, firstly, you had the changes to challenges. Now, if you kill a model that you're in combat with in a challenge, you lose the rest of your attacks past that initiative step. So huge downside in terms of you go in with your lord with a great weapon. If you're an elf, you still have to strike first. There's no way around it. Then you kill them with your 4 attacks with a great weapon. You don't get to swing with the dragon. You don't get to do your stomps, all of that good stuff. It is a little bit unclear in some ways how this works. I've seen some people argue that because of the wording, if you get to attack with the dragon, you get to make the stomps. I do not think this is correct, and I think it is very clearly not the intent of what they're going for. It just means that any dragon that can use a great weapon, any dragon rider that can use a great weapon that doesn't have strikes first, the dragon's always going to get to make its 6 high strength, high quality attacks, and then also get to make the stomps no matter whether or not they kill the opponent, which helps max out that combat res. So I'm pretty certain that is not the intent, nor really how it works, but you may have seen that, so before I get plenty of comments saying, oh, actually, this is not how that is. Anyway, combat res. You're now much more limited about how much combat resolution you can get in a challenge. This is also compounded by 2 changes. Well, 3 changes, I should say. 2 changes to infantry. The first is the parry save. So you've got a better save on infantry now if you've got a hand weapon and shield. Your save, if you had light armor shield, previously it was a 5 up, now it's a 6 up. A 4 up. Goes the other way. You get an additional +1 to your save to a maximum of a 3+. But also, if you're an infantry unit and you outnumber your opponent, you get +1 to your combat res. On top of that, close order, the bonus that you get for being unit strength 5 and having the close order rule, now becomes unit strength 10. So we see that not only do dragons have more difficulty getting through challenges, they now have to deal with 2 points of combat res swing. They lose 1 and infantry gain 1. So things are very different in terms of being able to put a dragon into the front of the unit. Other changes, obviously the Poison Death Stars are killed with this, so one of the natural predators for dragons comes out of the meta. I think if it didn't, dragons would be basically unplayable in terms of not only are they a lot harder to use, they're also pretty heavily nerfed, or they've got a very strong counter to them. But we do see a lot of changes here, and now we've seen a drop-off, I would say, in the number of dragons played, and how they have played, or how they are played, I should say, is changed. And that's what I want to talk about today, and also talk about what I think is going to happen with dragons in the future. First of all, I want to have a look at the stats. So a great website if you're interested in looking at your rankings in terms of how you're doing against other people in the country. And this is not necessarily if you're one of the, you don't have to be one of the top players in the country. I find a lot of people that I talk to like looking at how they're doing in relation to other people as a measure of individual progress over time. If you look, compared to how you did in 2024 compared to 2025, it's nice to see actual results and placings to see where your difference. Oldworldrankings.com is the website that I'm referencing. I will put that in the description. Great website there. And not only does it have all of the stats that you might be looking at, it also has stuff like global faction statistics, and it's a place that you can find other lists. This isn't a sponsor. I just really, really like their website, and it's very easy to use. So the least I can do is give them a proper shout out as I'm going to be going through. So what I want to do is start off with having a look at how dragons performed over the first year, and then have a look at how they did from the beginning of 2025 up until the FAQ, and then we'll also have a quick look at how they've done post FAQ, and we'll go on and have a look at the lists as well. So this is just the first year in which, it's ending at the release date of the Empire Arcane Journal. So we've had the Warriors of Chaos Arcane Journal, we have had what's the ordering? We haven't had the High Elf Arcane Journal, we haven't had the Wood Elf Arcane Journal. Obviously there's no Arcane Journal there for anything like Dark Elves being a legacy faction, but we've got the Warpfire Dragon in the game, which means by this point we've seen all of the dragons that we're going to get. There's just slightly different versions that you can tweak around with in terms of item loadouts now, but frankly, if you're taking dragons, you're probably just giving them saves. That's the main thing that you're going to be doing with them. So if we look at the stats here, just to get a baseline of what we're expecting. Now, this is one that it's hard to look at in terms of what we're expecting, and also, at the start of the game, people were a lot less focused with what they thought was good. Lists have definitely refined a lot over the last sort of year and a half. But Tomb Kings, one of the things that they can do was go a double dragon with Necrosphinx build, sat around 40%-ish. If you're in this bound here, this is what Gomo has decided is the healthy range. What does he go down to? Just under 40%. Something to consider is that it's not if you're below 50%, you're not losing more games than you're winning. This does factor in draws as well. So impossible to get amazing stats to start off with, but I think what we have is still decent in terms of just looking quite generally. You can see Wood Elves here, which was up at 48%. They had a build which was, a dragon, but also they were spamming Pillar of Fire. We've got High Elves here, 47.2%. Warriors of Chaos, 46.8%. Dark Elves languishing down at 43.8%. I really did try to get them as high as possible. But they're in the green band, which I think is the last time that we'll see them in the green band. So, but as you can see here, they're not necessarily super OP. They are pretty good. They're a faction that in good hands, there's a playstyle that in good hands would do pretty well. But you see that they tend to band pretty closely together. So we've got 48%, we've got 47%, we've got 47% as well. So the three main dragon armies that you'd expect to see, all sitting pretty similar to each other. And then, other bits and pieces. Wolves of the Sea, people hadn't really settled on a good Wolves of the Sea list by this point, I believe, because it was quite early. Moving on, something that I should reference is, obviously, if I'm just looking at the general performance for each army, there are lots of different things in there. Not all of these lists are going to be dragon lists, but this is just sort of seeing how the lists compare pre- and post-dragon nerfs more than anything else. The other thing is I have limited it to only 5-round events. I find that at smaller events, the list matters a lot less than the player. At a 2-day event, obviously still good players are going to have an edge over less skilled players. However, the list definitely factors in more. It's harder to coast through or just to get 3 good matchups, so you get less weird outliers. If you don't filter this way, you'll see stuff like Minotaur Bloodherd in the current game being one of the best factions, because they've been doing pretty well at RTTs, but pretty woeful at actual 5-round events. So we've got here, this is post Gobbo Star. This is Tracian Warhost doing very well. We've got the Wood Elves still doing pretty okay, 48.5%. High Elves still 48.4%. And then we've got Warriors of Chaos 48%. So again, sitting in a pretty similar spot. This is interesting. It's only 12 events, so it's a smaller faction size, I think this is more just a couple of good players overperforming with it. When you see smaller sample sizes, that's usually the thing. Whereas if you look at Exiles here, we've got 109 events, so that's more representative of actual stats. And Trollhorde doing well here is quite surprising to me. But yeah, so you're seeing here that, again, even with the Gobbo stars flying around, we've got Orcs and Goblins up at 48%. They're still doing pretty well as a faction. Now, everything changes post 1.5. If we come into the 1.5 set of stats, what have we got? Now, Wolves of the Sea are looking very solid. This is the current state of the game, post Cathay, post 1.5. Something that we didn't mention as well is just that Cathay and the change towards shooting armies is something that dragons do struggle with to an extent. Wolves of the Sea and Trace and Warhost, two outliers here that sit very pretty up at the top, and that's because not only are they able to have access to dragons, they also have access to other strong things, other strong mechanics. Wolves of the Sea being able to go first gives you a lot of play when you can still do shenanigans, getting into position turn 1, being very aggressive. Trace and Warhost bring that extra wood. It does give you a lot of flexibility to be able to score more in the current game. However, let's go down to High Elves, 42.4%. Warriors of Chaos, 41.8%. Wood Elves are, I think, yes. This is not just the dragon nerf. Wood Elves did have, during the between the two periods that we've just looked at, they had Pillar of Fire on their sisters nerfed, which was a huge hit to the one really competitive build that they had, which is, they were very oppressive and it probably did need to go away, but they're just languishing down here at a pretty unfun place to be. Dark Elves down here as well. So you can see post 1.5, the changes have made the armies that really lean on dragons as their main angle of resource and ability have significantly fallen down in terms of win rate. What does a successful dragon list look like? Well, if we start at the bottom, or start near the bottom, we'll do Dark Elves and Wood Elves first and get those out of the way. You can see there's not really that much. In terms of tournament placings with medals, there's one since Cathay dropped for Dark Elves, and that's me. And this was a small event as well. This was, I think there were about 10 of us, so it wasn't even something that I would say is incredibly competitive in terms of what we were bringing. Now, if we just very quickly look at my list, this is a Renegades list, just to be clear. So there is a single dragon, there's a Beastmaster on the Manticore. Manticore in Renegades goes up to toughness 5, and then Shield of Grond means incoming attacks are -1 strength, so you're effectively a second T6 monster, but only 300 points. I went with a Cold One Demonology Wizard, and then a Blaster Caster here with Ruby Ring of Ruin and Demonology for Steed of the Summoning. Core is Repeater Crossbowmen and Dark Riders, in 2 units of Cold One Knights, and then a unit of Doomfire Warlocks. The game plan with this is to have 2 high toughness beaters flying around together, which we'll get onto more when I talk about how you can actually use dragons in the current game, but then also having a third very aggressive piece with the Cold Ones buffed up here. This unit of Rampaging Banner Cold One Knights gets the Supreme Sorceress in, and then this unit with the Banner of Harganeth can run on their own, and both of them have a lot of attacks with good AP, so very solid there. And this felt fine to play. It's 2,600 points, so I was able to add some more shenanigans in. But if you play Renegades, you can do this list here by taking these 3 units, and then this unit and the Doomfire Warlocks, and you drop the unit of Cold One Knights, you drop the second Wizard, and you drop the Repeater Crossbowman. So if you're looking for how to play Dark Elves, you can do this. If you're not playing Renegades, I think it's just the classic double dragon. You go Black Dragon, with the Dreadlord, and then you go the Supreme Sorceress, both of them with a ward save, one with the Penitent of Caleth and one with the Talisman of Protection. And that's just fine. You still go for the same sort of evasive core here. You probably still go for Cold One Knights. Yes, they have stupidity. Is it the best thing that you can do in the game at the moment with Dark Elves? Probably still is. So you're a little bit limited if you're looking to play Dark Elves there. Moving on to Wood Elves. There's a little bit more success here for Wood Elves, but I don't think it's that they're a better army. I think it's that they have a greater player base. Now, we have 4 third places and a single second place. I'm not going to show the second place because this event here, Rebecca, who is a very solid player, local to me as well. But her list was played at an event of a similar size to my Dark Elf list. So again, it's hard to say that this is a representative list of what is good in Old World. I only showed mine in the previous Dark Elf bit because nobody else has done a podium with Dark Elves in recent memory. It's pretty sad out here for the Druchii. Would love to see some more people having success with them. What I will show is Irek's list. Now, Irek came third at the Square-Based Open Toronto, and Irek actually reached out to me to speak about how he's doing with Wood Elves recently. That's something that we're going to be doing hopefully over the next couple of weeks. So if you're a Wood Elf player, do stay tuned because there's going to be lots more actual Wood Elf content from someone who's done well with them at events, which is very exciting. I'm keen to hear what he has to say about them because they do feel very underwhelming in pretty much every situation I've found so far. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say there. But let's have a look at his list. So the Wood Elf list that you've gone for, and most of this is pretty standard. There is something on here that I truly do not understand, and I am looking forward to finding out what the hell is going on with the Wildwood Rangers. But a Wood Elf list from here, from the top, Glade Lord on a Forest Dragon is pretty standard. Now, Irek's gone with the Dragon Slaying Sword, aspect to the cat, which makes you better in challenges, gives you rerolls to hit in a challenge, and also some Armor Bane as well. I guess the attacks that come from the actual Glade Lord themselves aren't super important when you're looking at trying to chip through regular infantry. It's mostly the dragon doing the heavy lifting there. So I guess it's not too bad to go with a Dragon Slaying Sword. I personally am not a fan, but Irek's the only person having, like consistent success with them. So it's hard to argue with. A second Glade Lord. This is not a dragon, so we've got one dragon and then we've got a second more mobile piece here for Wood Elves. This is, again, pretty typical. A Glade Lord or a Glade... I've forgotten what the hero level version is. The other hero that can go on the stag. This is going aspect to the bear, so your T5 strength 5. Got a good ward save here from Hour of Destiny. A Luckstone in there to give a reroll. A level 2 wizard with elementalism, Ruby Ring of Ruin. Just trying to put some more output out there. Oh, it's battle magic and elementalism. I'm assuming given that... Oh, Arcane Familiar, I see. Interesting that you would roll on both of those laws. Again, these are things that I'm going to have to ask Eric about because looking at them, these make no sense to me, but I'm sure there's a plan there. Glade Riders, Wild Riders, more Wild Riders, Warhawk Riders with Spirit of Kurnos. I really like these things. They're good screening units or just they have a decent amount of punch, so you can actually get some damage in there. 3 units of Beast Pack, and then also Wildwood Rangers. Would I recommend that you duplicate this list if you're looking to play Wood Elves at tournaments yourself? No, not without knowing what it does. I don't know what it does, so hold off on that one. But I think the characters here, a Lord on Dragon, a Lord on Stag, a level 2 Wizard, and then this is obviously Wild Hunt, which I think is probably the best way to play Wood Elves. Wild Riders, a couple of units of Wild Riders, some Glade Riders, Warhawk Riders, and some Beast Packs. These are all good things to fit into your lists. If you filter specifically to Wild Hunt on the list search there, we do have Galidalama, I hope I said that right, who played Orion's Wild Hunt to a 3rd place finish, which again, very impressive there, and this is a pretty decently sized tournament. This is Double Dragon, and this is more typically what you see in terms of Wood Elves. So there's 4 big units of Glade Riders, which is, I think, very interesting. All of them have magic resist from the Obsidian Lodestone, or at least 2 of them do here. 2 of them don't, which is an interesting choice. So 2 with the reserve move and 2 with magic resist. They've got reserve move on 2 of the big bricks. 1 with Banner of Springtide, 1 with Banner of Midsummer's Eve, so you're getting quick shot or ignores cover on those respectively. Arcane Bodkin, so just looking to get as much output there from the bows as possible. And yeah, a couple of dragons on lords, a couple of lords on dragons, bringing the things that you might expect to see. So we've got the Armor of Destiny for a 4-up ward save, which is really nice there, and also the very good challenge model that's got Annoyance of Netlings, aspect of the cat, Armor of Meteoric Eye, and Talisman of Protection. 5-up armor save that can't be reduced. 5-up ward save that can't be reduced. Reroll hits in a challenge. -1 to be hit in a challenge. You get Armor Bane 1 additional from aspect of the cat. This is just going to do a lot there, and it means even if you get stuck in a challenge, this is the one that you want to get stuck in a challenge with an infantry model like a unit champion, because you're more likely to max out that overkill, or get closer to maxing it out, I should say. Max out your theoretical maximum, because you will do more damage with those rerolls and the extra armor bane there. Moving on to High Elves, we're seeing still some tournament success here, but it's starting to get higher. There's more High Elf players. They are arguably a more well-rounded army. You can do more things with them. So you can see here we've got 2 first place and 4 second places just for High Elf realms, and then also there's quite a few for Trace, which we'll get to in a second. If we start off by looking at Dallas Parker's list from Lone Star Open, you can see that they took a single dragon, alongside a griffin, which the griffin does act as a second piece that you can fly around with it. You've also got the Archmage level 3 on a steed with Battle Magic and Lore Familiar, giving you access to probably Fireball, Arcane Urgency, and then Filler Spell. Oaken Shield if you need the ward save because you're playing against a lot of shooting. Curse of Arrow Attraction is not bad in general. You've got some shooting in there. There's third spells that you can put in as you fancy. Hammer Hand if you really want to. The rest of the list is filled out with what you're going to see for most of these lists, which is a couple of units of Illyrian Reavers, a couple of units of Silver Helms. There'll be some combination of Silver Helms, Illyrian Reavers, and then also there's a single unit Sis of Avalon with a Ruby Ring for some fire support in the backlines, a Lothan Skycutter to be evasive, and 6 Dragon Princes, who are pretty solid just in terms of being able to bring the punch without needing support. They have a limited list of things that they can go into, but they can go very well into ranked up infantry. So we're going to talk about it more after we've gone through all of the lists that we've looked at. But the way that you need to play dragons now is either to get them into flanks or get them into the front, but with a unit that can bring combat res and also help you challenge out. And this list does that very well. You've got lots of unit champions here. The Illyrian Reaver challenges unit champions with skirmish, so you can 360-degree charge with an 18-inch declarable charge. You've got the Silver Helms that are still pretty fast. They're also more tanky. The Dragon Princes that can bring the oomph. And then also you've got a couple of other pieces here just as support. So I do like this list from Dallas Parker. Looking at Eric Lau's list from the Palm Springs Open, we see here, again, the other sort of tweak that you might see, which is double dragon. Prince, Archmage, both under dragon, jobs are good. You can go for lower toughness dragons with High Elves. They've got not only the Star Dragon, which is the top level dragon, they have got access to Moon Dragons and Sun Dragons. In my opinion, you probably just want to stay with that good dragon that is toughness 6. We're going to talk about Chaos, which have toughness 5 dragons, but I think that works for Chaos in a way that it doesn't work for High Elves. So T6 dragons looking good here. As mentioned, all the things that we're expecting to see. Silver Helms, Illyrian Reavers in core, and then we've got a couple of Skycutters and a couple of Sisters. So this one leans a little bit more into ranged pressure with less sort of core scoring potential, but it's still pretty solid. And you've got, one big unit that's got good combat res and immunity or defense against magic missiles, and the rest of them still bringing some Rings of Fury in there as well. Looking at the results for Trace Warhost, I'm a little bit surprised that they've not got more wins than High Elves in general. I believe difference in meta over in America, the regular High Elf army is performing a lot better, but I feel like in the meta that we see here in the UK at the very least, I value what Tracy and Warhost brings more. They've got a lot of really good skirmish, so in a shooting meta where Cathay is very scary, being able to skirmish, being able to bring a wood to hide behind or to be in so that you can get additional penalties to be hit. You've got a piece of just good equipment on all of your units that you're taking that give you an additional +1 to your armor save against non-magical shooting. All of this is fantastic. So let's have a look at Nick Walsh's list that went 3rd place at the WNC Old World Open. This is pretty much, well, there are 2 ways to play it, in my opinion. The first is that you go with single dragon with an Archmage that is going to sit within a big unit of White Lions. And I like this list. I think I lean towards more the double dragon list, but it does depend what you want to go with. So if you're looking for a single dragon list that brings a brick of White Lions, this is the direction you want to go down. We've got the White Lions with the ward save against magic missiles, full command. Couple of units of Tracian Woodsman, just very efficient units. I got 2 units of Sisters of Avalon with both Seafarer, Ruby Ring of Ruin. You're going to see this basically for every High Elf list that's bringing Sisters. We've got the Wizard to support them with Lore Familiar, Power Scroll, and High Magic. So Nick is leaning on Walk Between Worlds to make them ethereal. You can do not any lore, but most laws. Battle Magic for the ward save and Arcane Urgency is great, and also the Fireball so they can have more pressure on the map at the same time. Elementalism for Earthen Ramparts. I always get them confused between Battle Magic and Earthen Elementalism. But also, you know, you've got TMP to get you out of sticky spots. You've got Wind Blast. You've got Plague of Rust. There's a lot of really good stuff in Elementalism as well. And just to round it out, Nick has got a Griffin character here to fly around with the Prince. And I think that's so important when you're looking at taking just a single dragon. Having something mobile that can fly around and soak challenges, we'll get to, again, at the later part of the video. But this is something that's really important to put in. So if you're going to go for the wizard in a unit of White Lions, this is the direction you want to go down. Just very quickly looking at another one of Nick's lists, this is the other direction that I would go down, and I personally prefer, although I'd be swapping out that unit of White Lions for just more Tracy and Woodsman. This is the double dragon build. You can go double Prince, or you can go Archmage and Prince. Both are very solid. A couple of big units of Woodsman. I like 14. That feels like a solid place to land on. Again, with Assist of Avalon. And this unit of White Lions here is fine, but I think if you just replace them with a third unit of Tracy and Woodsman, you're probably going to find it a lot better, or at least I found it a lot better. So if you're looking for a Tracian Warhost list, this is the sort of archetype that I would recommend building off personally. I think it's easier to play around with, and leans more towards my preference at least. Moving on to Tomb Kings, this one is less of a dragon army, but they still do have dragons, even though their dragons are on massive bases and a little bit more underwhelming. So there's quite a few good results here for Tomb King players, and I think the list that most well represents what I would think of when I'm thinking about a Tomb Kings list that goes heavy onto dragons is Bryn's list from the Black Country GT. So this is a Tomb King on the Bone Dragon with Armor of Ages, Talisman of Protection. You can give it a Biting Blade, you can give it a Great Weapon. Both of those have merits, depending on which way you want to go down. And then we've got double Necrosphinx as well. Those are the important parts. Now, you can either go for a second dragon, whether it is a High Priest or a second Tomb King on dragon, and then you just go for a very cheap Mortuary Priest to make sure that your list is legal and you've got actually a second, a caster in there to make the list legal. Or you can go single dragon and then try and buff up the rest of the list. Prince Apophos is an interesting tech piece. You can definitely look at him. He's good enough that you look at him and go, he's not terrible. I don't know that he makes it into my list, but we're in one with him, so what do I know? We've also then got what you'd expect to see here, a level 4 wizard elementalism. Small Scroll of Transmogrification is fun, maybe not necessary, but again, he's one with it. Royal Herald with the Banner of the Desert Winds, going with the Warriors as well, who've got the Nicarian Phalanx Big Brick. And this just gives you a lot of flexibility with your scoring core. But it means that you can basically run around with a Dragon and 2 Necrosphinxes. And while the Necrosphinxes can't soak the challenge for you, what they can do is they can add combat res while the Tomb King's stuck in a challenge. Technically, Prince Apophos can fly around and do challenges, so that's something to keep in mind as well if you want to use him in that way. And I wonder if that was the use case for him. I'd have to ask. Or, potentially find out yourself. Go to, I've forgotten the name of his channel. I will flash it up on screen if I remember, and if not, it'll be in the description as well. I will remember to put it in the description. Sorry, Bryn. Moving on to Warriors of Chaos, something that's really interesting is that if you look at the successful lists, and I'm not including this one here, because it was a 1,000 point tournament, but all of the tournament placings have 0 to 1 character dragons, and I think that's very interesting in the Grand Army for Warriors of Chaos. Now, I think the reason for that is not that dragons are bad, but it is that if you want to go double or triple dragon, you can kind of do it as well or better in one of the other detachments. We'll look at it in a second. But let's have a look at Matthew Clayton, who came 8th at the Welsh Open recently, which was a big event here in the UK. And this is more along the lines of what I'd expect to see for a double or triple dragon list for Warriors of Chaos. We've got a Lord on dragon, an Exalted Champion on dragon with the 5-up armor save that can't be reduced, a 5-up ward save and built, and then the regen here. I personally am a fan of double Exalted Champion, so both of them can have a regen, but some people do like to go for the Lord. We've got a big brick of Chaos Warriors for scoring and Chaos Knights as well. Giving them the magic resist here is just very solid, and it's what you're looking for as a Warriors of Chaos player. You want to try and reduce the amount of things that people can cast spells into. And then that third dragon, the Warpfire Dragon here, which comes inbuilt with magic resist 2. And it's one of the reasons that I like the Exalted Champion, because you can give them, instead of the Armor of Meteoric Iron, you can have both Exalted Champions with a regen save. If you replace that with the Brazen Collar, you can have magic resist, and then you can also have 2 favors of the gods on each very easily. I know you've gone Mark of Zinch here, which does give you magic resist 1, but I think you can just get magic resist 2 on there very comfortably without giving up really much of anything, and you're still able to go Mark and Nurgle, which is very nice defensively. But this is the sort of archetype I'd expect to see for Warriors of Chaos. Looking at a couple of lists from Wolves of the Sea, we've got a list from Dr. Luke Blacksill, who ran a single Chaos Dragon in his list at the Saffron Slam a couple of months ago, back in July. So there's a couple of Gigantic Spawn and Nurgle, then we've got some Scoring Core, Marauders, etc. We've got a Chaos Lord on Dragon, and then a couple of Sorcerers, Exalted Sorcerers here. So this is more leaning into the ability to do magic while also having the dragons, which is, I think, is solid. I still like the multiple dragon build more. And then also we've got Michael Shearer, who has got a Chaos Lord on Dragon and Galrock, alongside the, no third dragon, just going more heavily into core. And I think this is really interesting, because if you just look at all of the Warriors of Chaos lists between them, there's not actually that many people playing Warriors of Chaos at tournaments and having success with them, which is a real marked difference compared to the previous experience that we were having. I still feel like Warriors of Chaos are a very solid army, but they feel like maybe they're one that they're suffering a little bit more. And I know there's a lot of results up here, but if you just scroll down, you can see how many people are playing them. And then if you look at the other 2, Wolves of the Sea and Heralds of Darkness, there's not a huge amount of success between the 2 of those as well. So where does that leave us with dragons? Well, I think one of the main things that it's worth considering is when you've looked at the successful lists, if you want to play dragons, if you want to write dragon lists, is that you need to have something that can run around with them as a challenge soaker. That's not always going to be a second dragon, but a second dragon is one of the best ways to do it. If you've got a cheaper unit that you can use, such as a model on a griffin or a manticore or a stag for wood elves, these things are worth considering. You just have to protect them a little bit more than you would a dragon. Obviously, if you've been playing dragons, you're used to them being kind of the big kids on the block and not having too many things to worry about. You can kind of park them out in the open and not worry all that much a lot of the time. But you need to bring something that is able to get in, soak the challenge, make sure that you don't just lose the combat entirely. Things that are great for that, as mentioned, those other characters on the fast mounts, but also skirmishing cavalry, such as Glade Riders or Illyrian Reavers or Dark Riders. All of those are pretty solid at doing it. Hard-hitting cavalry is really nice as well. If you've got heavy cavalry that does a lot of attacks, comes with, the ability to turn off rank bonuses with first charge, anything like that is really, really solid. So just in the list building, when you're looking at what you want to go with, consider bringing, skirmishing cavalry if you've got it, heavy cavalry if you've got it, a second character on a dragon, or, just bringing 2 dragons, a second character on a fast mount, or a second dragon if you've got availability for that. These are all things that you can do to make your dragon lists more playable. What other things do you want to be looking at? Well, the dragon playstyle is a lot of... There are 2 ways to do it. You can either go down the rank of, I'm going to bring Scoring Core that tries not to die, and play the more sort of evasive style that we were playing before we had objectives. Some armies can still do that very well. Anything that can stand on objectives and score without dying, I think is very solid. So Trace really is the forefront there in my mind. But Warriors of Chaos can do it as well, because they can bring pretty resilient units that just stand on objectives or stand near objectives and not worry too much about what's coming towards them. The second way of building is to go full pressure, and that's we see mostly with, if you were to make a High Elf Grand Army list, where you've got the Illyrian Reavers, you've got the Silver Helms, you've got the Dragon Princes, all of these things are fairly well represented across the board. You might see Chaos Knights for Warriors of Chaos. If you wanted to do Heralds of Darkness, you could do a dragon list with Heralds of Darkness very comfortably, using those Warriors of Chaos there. What else have we got? Illyrian Reavers, we've got Silver Helms. If you wanted to go very aggressive with Wood Elves, Orion's Wild Hunt, you can go for the very, very, very squishy but very hard-hitting Wild Riders that you can bring in core. Obviously, they score to some extent, but realistically, it's going to be more a case of trying to stop your opponent from scoring with that sort of playstyle. So that's the list building sort of considerations to put in. And also, you will have some points that aren't dragons and core. So what are you bringing in rare? It depends. It depends. If you're going high elves, it might be sisters because they're shooting, even though it doesn't necessarily play super well with the game plan. If you're going grand army, where you're trying to be very aggressive and pressuring with dragon princes or silver helms or core like that, you might look at bringing something heavy hitting like dragon princes or cold one knights just to back up the dragons, make sure that you've got more oomph there, or you might just bring more evasive pieces like those Lathan Skycutters. So the list building, I think, is something that we've looked at in pretty decent detail there and should hopefully be self-explanatory there. And hopefully looking at all of the lists that we've looked at, that's something that you'll be able to translate into writing for your own lists. So with the list building out of the way, what can we do on the tabletop to make sure that our dragons are actually being effective? Because I am a big fan of how the nerf came in. I was saying that things needed to be nerfed to make the game better. One of them was the Poison Death Star. I did want to see that gone. But also Pillar of Fire needed to be nerfed, and also how oppressively good dragons were. And it was less maybe so at the top tables, but into the sort of like middle tables and below, dragons were very, very oppressive pre 1.5, unless you had a list that was specifically set up to deal with them. And I think they've done a good job of that and making sure that they're playable without being completely useless. I think you just have to think a little bit harder or commit more points for your dragons to be good. So how are we going to use dragons on the tabletop? First of all, step one, you can no longer just park your dragon in front of an enemy unit and expect to win. If you do so, your opponent may charge you with lots of static combat res, and at that point, you're going to be double outnumbered. You're going to be very sad, and you might get run down if they're able to get anything with Swift Stride into you, or if you just roll poorly. That does happen. I lost a dragon, funnily enough, at the Dark Elf event that I showed you the list of, at the start of the list section there. Secondly, think about your positioning with your dragons. You have the best stat in the game, which is movement. You've got a very, very high movement stat. And if you're paying for your movement stat with your points, or the opportunity cost of not taking something different, if you're not using that movement to good effect, you're going to find that you're going to lose games, and that is how it should be. You shouldn't be able to just go, here's my bludgeon, it also moves incredibly quickly, sits in front of you. You need to think about how you're using it. Now, you can still bludgeon by overcommitting and putting 2 dragons in front of something, and then they charge you. Job's a good one. But what you can also do is get into flank and rear. Why are you wanting to charge someone from the flank and the rear? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, if they're not heavy infantry, you are going to disrupt them. They're going to lose their rank bonus if your unit strength 5 or greater, which all dragons are. If they are heavy infantry, too bad, so sad. Nearly every dragon in the game won't disrupt them. You need to be unit strength 10. That's only a Chaos Lord on a dragon, which I really don't think is the best way to run a Chaos Dragon, even though it is only the only toughness 6 one instead of toughness 5. But I still think that you're wanting to look more at the you want to be looking at positioning. So flank, rear, you're hopefully turning off their rank bonus, so they're getting 2 to 3 less combat res for a normal unit. You're also getting +1 or +2 of your own, so it's starting to even up. They've got close order, they've got infantry outnumber. You haven't got any of those, but if you charge them in the rear, suddenly you've evened that up because you've got 2 combat res from being in the rear. Not only that, they can't move through the ranks to fight you. Now, characters can move through the ranks, and this is specifically a rule for characters. Unit champions are not able to move through the ranks, which means that they are not able to declare challenges into you. You have to be in the same fighting rank as the thing that you want to challenge for it to be able to fight. Again, this is something that I've seen people arguing about. I really don't think there's any validity to saying, oh, well, I'm in one fighting rank, so I can challenge someone in a different fighting rank. You have to be in the same fighting rank. Anyway, that aside, if you get a rear or a flank charge, and your opponent doesn't have any characters in the unit, which means that their command group have to be in the middle of the unit, you can make it so you aren't going to be able to be challenged out. And that is going to be huge. You're going to go into combat, which your opponent would normally win very handily, and suddenly you're going to be winning that one pretty heavily there. So getting into a flank or a rear, very, very solid. This also comes into play if your opponent has got characters in the unit that they might throw into the bus. So if they've got, a cheap level 1 wizard that's cast Glittering Robes or something like that, yes, that wizard's great, but I'm willing to declare a challenge with it and just sacrifice it under the dragon to make sure my unit doesn't lose combat. That's going to be good for me. So how do you overcome that? Well, if you still get the flank or the rear charge, you can charge something else into the front that doesn't even have to be a unit champion, doesn't have to be able to accept the challenge, but because you have got your opponent's character in the fighting rank, they're not able to move to the fighting rank. This is a rule that specifically you can only do it if you're not in the fighting rank already. So let's say your opponent's got a unit champion and a wizard in the front rank of their graveguard. You charge the front of their graveguard with a Necrosphinx, and you charge the side of the unit with a Tomb King on Dragon. They're not able to move their wizard through the ranks, so they are unable to declare a challenge with it in any... Well, I guess you can still declare the challenge, there's just no one to accept it. So, flank or rear charges using that movement, very important if you can pull it off. This sounds common sense, but I think I've watched a lot of people play dragons, obviously with the coaching as well. Something that people still have got into the habit of and still do is people do just sort of park their dragons far forwards, but not as far forwards as they could go, and maybe take some risky charges with them that they shouldn't. Okay, I'm not able to get into the flank or rear. What am I going to do now? Well, you can go into the front of a unit, but you have to do it in a way where you're able to also accept the challenge with something else. That can be put 2 dragons into the front of the unit. Great, that does the job. You'll probably win combat. If you've got 1,000 points of characters into the front of most units, you're going to win that fight. That's a lot of commitment, though. So you need maybe want to spread it out, and a good way to do that is by putting units of cavalry, because cavalry are inherently fast. They're not as fast as dragons, they're not as maneuverable as dragons, but having cavalry around is a great way to also challenge out with, the unit champion of, say, the Silver Helms or something like that. So that's a really solid way to do it. Skirmishers here are very solid, because they don't have to position anywhere near as aggressively. You can just sort of peek around the edge of the dragon. As long as enough of them can see. Remember that skirmishers have to have at least 51% of the unit able to see the thing that they want to charge. So, a unit of 6 skirmishing Illyrian Reavers, if you position them so 4 will be able to see your opponent on your next charge phase. That's something that you'll be able to put in, and also potentially keep them safe from shooting, depending on how you position them, using the dragon as a screening piece there. So having something else in the front rank to charge with sounds common sense, something I don't see people doing enough, and that is the next way to use a dragon efficiently. Another tip for dragons is pick on units much smaller than you. The whole adage of, why don't you fight someone your own size? No, that's terrible. I'm going to lose. Why don't I fight someone much smaller than me? If your opponent's bringing single-ranked cavalry, for example, so they're bringing maybe Silver Helms, a unit of 5 or 6, usually it's going to be 6 or 7. Let's say that they've got 6 heavy cavalry with a standard bearer and closer order. Cool. You can just park in front of them, and it's not unlikely that you will do 2 to 3 wounds to them. And that means, yes, there is a world where you fail because they have a musician, you lose by 1, you roll horrendously and break and flee. That's pretty unlikely. This is something that you can do with a relative level of impunity. If you've got leadership 10, you're failing that test, 1 in 12 times? If your leadership 9 is a little bit more risky, becomes, I think, 1 in 9 is the maths on how frequently that you would break and flee instead of just giving ground. But if you're in front of your opponent and, you block them in, they charge you, or you charge them, you just then continue through the next round of combat with them. After you are pretty likely to not run away and get run down, you can just really go to town on that unit and kill most of them, because you have a dragon with dragon attacks and stomps, even though you would have lost those attacks previously into the challenge. That pretty much covers the obvious things that you can do with a dragon. There's also other things you can do, such as if you're a high elf player and you've got you've got high magic or whatever, you can take Courage of an Aryan and cast the Unbreakable spell on yourself, so that when you go into combat, you give ground when you lose after you've killed the unit champion instead of fleeing, and then you're well positioned so that your opponent can't get past you. That's a more specific one for a faction. Or, if you're playing Warriors of Chaos, you can just full send with all 3 dragons. It's really hard for your opponent to deal with 3 dragons to the face in 1 turn. So stuff like that for individual factions, we can maybe talk about in future videos when we're looking at those factions again in greater detail. Something that I want to get back to doing now that we're starting to see the meta settle and things change up. But I'm hoping for some big nerfs to Cathay, and by that I mean take him out back, ask him about their favourite rabbit, and shoot him in the back of the head. Sorry to all of the Cathay players who like Cathay but don't necessarily want to play balloons, but that faction does need to be hamstringed pretty damn hard. Anyway, moving on. What do I think the world looks like for dragons in the future? Well, we are now coming up to basically 2 years into the edition, and with some speculation, I would not be surprised to see this edition last less than 4 years. Now, I've heard people talking about how they would prefer to not have a new edition sooner rather than later, given the trend of Age of Sigmar and 40k, where they are completely changed edition to edition. They are very heavily shifted. I think that will not happen here. I think we're going to be looking at something more similar to Horus Heresy, which did change to some extent, but the rules writing got tightened up significantly. So I'd love to see Old World 2.0 coming out in the next 2 years, but coming out fixing some issues, not necessarily making a huge upheaval, but making the actual rules a lot tighter. That'd be great. In that world, I don't know what the world looks like for dragons. I hope things stay the same in terms of they remain as something that you can't shoot the rider off from under the dragon or vice versa. I just think that was, we never really saw dragons played outside of people bringing their big cool models, but they weren't very good typically, from what I remember and from what I've been told. Maybe there were some brief pockets, and also the game was a lot more played. As opposed to having like a global meta, it was a lot more, you just worked out what you thought was good, and frankly, the better players won in the local meta more than anything else. It was less to do with the army they were playing and more to do with, having that big fish in the small pond. That said, I'd like to see dragons continue to be playable in the way that they are. I think they've got a nice balance for them. You have to work harder for what you get with a dragon now, and I think that's good than it was. What I'd like to see is better stuff around the dragons to support them, because I think that's really where the dragons are falling down. Wood Elf dragons are pretty good. I don't know that they need to be buffed, but Wood Elves in general, I'd like to see more there. So I think that's really what I'd like to see for dragon armies in 2026. Dragons stay the same, everything around them just gets a little bit better, a little bit more interesting, and a little bit more worthwhile using.